welcome to Mushroom Hour. Today we're excited to chat with Tyler Huggins and Justin Whiteley, cutting-edge food pioneers and founders of Meati, a fungi-based protein company. Tyler and Justin met in Boulder, Colorado during their PhD studies at the University of Colorado. Tyler was studying civil and environmental engineering, and Justin was in mechanical engineering. The two learned early in their careers that the best way to make a difference is through entrepreneurship. They connected over a few beers and realized their shared passion for helping people and the planet through engineering and science. Instead of looking for others to solve the world's challenges, they wanted to be hands-on, conquering these pressing issues themselves. Tyler and Justin's first project together used fungi to produce battery electrodes that could outperform conventional flaked graphite and lithium-ion batteries. That's probably a whole nother podcast of its own. Batteries were awesome and all, but this engineering duo knew that they could make a greater impact if they focused on food. And it wasn't long before they pivoted their attention to something more personal, meat consumption. Tyler and Justin imagined a food company that would encourage people to eat alternatives to animal meats and save their real meat consumption for weekends, special occasions, and as they say, the rest is meatstery. Justin and Tyler, thank you so much for joining us on Mushroom Hour.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm a huge fan of the product. I think it's amazing. As a lot of listeners may know, people that follow me, I am vegan. Mushrooms, I think, are such a core part. If you're going to make that choice to either eat less meat or eat no meat, mushrooms and different products like mycelium-based products, like what you guys do, is a huge part of the answer to fill nutritional gaps and, flavor and satiation gaps that might pop up. So I'm really excited. And before we jump into everything about the products, I've got tons of questions. But what's a little more about the story about, how you guys got into Kingdom Fungi, a little bit more about your relationship with fungi and how all this came together?
Yeah, again, thank you for having us on here. My background with fungi has been sort of long and winding. I grew up in Montana on the border of national forest land. And so I spent a lot of time out there just like hiking around, exploring, creeks and crevices and cracks and all kinds of fun stuff out there. And I would, especially when I was younger, I was just fascinated by mushrooms and would always try to go find different ones. That was my initial sort of planting of the seed, if you will. Yeah. Then I went off to college, studied ecology and biology. I started working with the Forest Service, doing land restoration stuff and studying invasive species. Did a study on mycorrhizal fungi with native plants and the effect of also on invasives. Then spent a long time, started my own company to do land restoration work. And really I felt like it wasn't making a big enough impact. So I went back to graduate school and started studying environmental engineering. So how do you use microbes, leverage the efficiencies of biology to solve problems? Was mostly working with bacteria, algae, yeast, that sort of thing, but was really fascinated by fungi and specifically filamentous fungi and all the cool things that you could do with that and how it was really just an open book as far as research and scientific discovery. So that's when I dove in and really see, okay, how do I actually work with these types of organisms to solve problems?
And I think that's such a huge thing because a lot of us get really inspired by different microorganisms, their remediative potential, all the potential is locked in there. But it can be tough to find applied uses, especially when you talk about mycorrhizal fungi, when you talk about remediative fungi. There's a lot of research on exactly how the processes work. But in terms of applying it, that's kind of that next step that can really change the game. So that's really cool. And what about yourself, Justin?
My relationship with fungi is actually rather newer. Prior to meeting Tyler, I actually didn't have a whole lot of experience with it. And actually, even on the bio side, just relatively newer. My background was more in material science, and I was working with just real far out materials, carbon fiber, nanotubes, synthesizing new stuff. In your intro, you talked about, a lot of the battery work. That was what I was doing at the time, was kind of working on the next generation of materials and batteries, new architectures. How do we redesign the battery to make it more efficient? And then Tyler, who was working on the same campus but a different building, different department, brought over this idea that he had been kind of working up and formulating of, can we fungal mycelium to grow really intricate structures, and can we direct it to grow things that replace really energy intensive and resource intensive materials, one of them being the graphite you would find in your lithium ion battery, oddly enough. And I think the first time we met, we must have talked for hours just over the possibilities of this, not just replacing like that material, but I think we came up with the concept. We could replace almost every single layer in the battery, the battery separator, the cathode material, anode material, even like the whole housing of it. And so he kind of got me hooked. And for a while, I was working with the material, looking at it under scanning electron microscopes. I swear, for the first couple of years I was doing that, it was blowing me away every time I seen. I mean, the structure, the filaments you make, I mean, it's things that we spend weeks making, and it makes it naturally and in a matter of hours. Yeah, it is just, it brought me to appreciate, the efficiencies of biology, understanding this new concept of what we'll call biomanufacturing. Again, like you said, we could do a whole hour just on this concept alone, so I won't take too much time on it. And since then, since we've been working together, what's been fascinating me about fungi is really their industrial uses. I've been focusing a lot on how even today's world, we produce things as complex as penicillin, but a lot of the enzymes we use and organic acids. And I mean, all of these are derived from us directing how fungi grow in really specific controlled environments. It's just fascinating to me.
Mushroom guys will do that. It sounds like for you, Tyler was the mushroom guy that kind of inoculates you. And I think everyone who's into mushrooms ends up doing that. That's all we can talk about because they are so innately fascinating. People tend to then share in that passion to get obsessed with them as well. It's pretty easy to get inoculated. But yeah, I have to agree that mycomaterials are one of the most exciting potentials that people don't always recognize when you first think of mushrooms. But from a material science standpoint, they're fascinating. I've seen the work by people like Biome over in the UK, a bunch of different groups now working on different applications of mycelium as a material. And what's so cool is it really scales infinitely. It wants to grow and it grows fast, and there's not a lot of overhead needed to get mushrooms to just do what they do, which is grow. So really cool. And material science isn't too far off from where you guys are today, I think. I mean, you're kind of food material scientists at this point.
Just to jump in here, like that's where it's been so helpful, I think, is because as a biologist, you're studying like these natural phenomena and you're kind of watching them from a distance, and you're, and it's kind of like this, it's a separate world that you're observing. Where material science, and especially what Justin was doing, was like understanding materials at a fundamental level and how properties of these materials result in performance. So it's very rare that you'll find someone who has both of those disciplines. And so it was sort of, my understanding of biological phenomena, and then how do you control them? And then Justin's background on, okay, these are the certain properties that we want to target if we want to have a specific outcome. Again, that was combining those two disciplines that was allowing us to then, actually create materials that could be competitive in today's market, which is not easy to do.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a perfect match of those skill sets that you need. And that's something I want to talk about is the skill sets that have come together in building this company. But right there, I think you highlight the birth of this. But then why meat consumption? Why do you guys pivot there? Because we just hinted at like infinite possibilities, building buildings and spaceships and batteries, like who knows? But why did you end up focusing on meat consumption?
I think so. Both of like Justin and I's academic careers were always about building the skill sets to ultimately create a company that we believe, through entrepreneurship, you'll have the greatest impact on society. Right. So one thing we learned, man, we just got beat down after years and years and years of people being like, that's crazy, man. That's like voodoo science. That's not scalable. That's not practical. When we were trying to do the batteries, we were trying to do filtration, absorbance. We were trying to do all kinds of stuff. But we knew we had a really powerful technology, a biomanufacturing technology a platform that we could make a variety of different things. And protein was always sort of part of that platform that we knew that had potential. And then once we test these other verticals, these different applications, we just, like I said, just kept hitting roadblocks. Once we got into food, people were like, wait, stop for a second. Now, you can produce protein really efficiently. You can produce textured protein. Like that is where the market has a huge problem and wants the solution. And the fact that you have all these like, sustainability and resilience and all this stuff wrapped into the technology, this particular market vertical wants those attributes and is actually really excited about it. So once we pivoted into food, it satisfied our sort of need to have impact. It was just sort of a rocket ship.
And it's not that we were on the wrong pathway to start. There was a lot of potential in batteries and a lot of the other cool materials we could make. The time it would take to commercialize those and actually get them into the marketplace,
right.
10 plus years. And I think it just as humans, we can't keep waiting to make the impacts we need. We need true sustainable environmental improvements in our manufacturing systems. And the fact that, meat is so impactful to the environment is something we knew we just had to pursue as soon as we could.
Yeah, like I said, as someone who's been vegan for about 7 years now, I know all the arguments backward and forwards in terms of, the waste that comes from animal agriculture, the land use problem, how much land is dedicated to animal agriculture, and of course, just the way that animal agriculture is executed today is not healthy. We all know the problems of confined animal feedlots, all that stuff. So I think a focus there is really one way to make a huge impact. But then I think some people see the other meat alternatives. Obviously we're in a time where this is a huge trend. A lot of people are identifying these issues with animal agriculture. We're seeing products out in the market, but then I guess, how do you guys think that your choice of making a meat derived from mycelium stacks up versus something like a soy product or a wheat gluten product, especially when you hit back on some of these same issues of sustainability and really making an impact?
When we decided to shift into meat alternatives, we knew we had to create something that would get mass market adoption. We didn't want to create sort of a niche solution that would only solve a very small problem. Again, our whole desire was to solve big worldly problems. And so we knew it had to be mass adoption. In order to do that, you have to get very similar consumer experience to animal-based meat. And so what is that? I mean, we looked at meat as an experience, right? It's that savory taste. It's that textured muscle structure. It's the filliness. It's the ability to grill it, chop it, put it in burritos, bowls, all that sort of stuff. And because we spent so much time on materials production, we understood how to control the growth of mycelium in such a way to actually mimic muscle structure.
Right.
So we know we were able to sort of satisfy that, use occasion, but then we also knew it had to be better than traditional animal-based products, right? Because when consumers go to the meat aisle and they're looking at something they're used to, why are they going to choose us over traditional animal-based products? So it has to be an elevated nutritional experience. So we spent a ton of time and effort in making sure that we actually had as much or more protein. This fiber that you find in vegetables is super important for gut health, and then the vitamins and minerals that you find in healthy superfoods. And so we spent a lot of time developing this sort of elevated product that we thought would have mass market adoption, and then ultimately produced in a way that was less resource intensive and scalable.
So I asked about other meat analogs, and you guys are going head up against meat. I mean, you see yourselves as a direct competitor to animal products, really.
For sure, that's the competitor, right? And again, I don't want to say that like we're trying to replace animal-based meat consumption, because that's just, I think, would be extremely hard. We want to help supplement the market with something that you can eat every day that doesn't sacrifice health, that doesn't sacrifice the environment. And then, as you said in the intro, then when the time is right, and if you think it's appropriate, depending on, who you are, you could have a sustainably, produced, animal-based product.
There are people that are purists on the anti-meat argument. I think, though, from my years of being in that camp, it's a very personal choice what you eat. So I think this is almost a way to make bigger change, is to give people an option that just switches them away, and they don't have to have that come to Jesus and change their entire diet. You're actually making an impact by just providing this other option that's easy to switch to. That easier consumer adoption leads to a faster, bigger change. So I'm all about that.
That's just better, right? Like I hate to have a comparison of Tesla, but the idea was to create a sexier, better performing car that just happens
Right.
to be electric, right? And then they
Right.
get people to adopt it, and then slowly but surely you reduce the cost and you get mass market adoption. We're thinking of taking a very similar approach.
And then the other thing I was going to throw in there regarding kind of just other meat alternatives on the market, if you are going to make something that's so impactful and so accessible to everyone, it really shouldn't be allergenic. So unfortunately, soy allergies are huge, and gluten allergies, not to mention just gluten is not a very good quality of protein. But if you're going to redesign meat, let's, go after all kind of the areas we can make it better, really make it accessible to everyone. I think that's really important as we kind of see the new meat alternatives that come into the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, myself, I have misgivings about fake meat products at times. And I've always seen mushrooms as really the ultimate replacement for meat from a nutritive, texture, all the standpoints we're talking about. So we've talked a lot about how great the product is, but I mean, what is the product? What is the meaty protein? Best you guys can describe it. I mean, what is the meaty platform you guys are building?
I mean, the underlying core ingredient is fungi mycelium, right? In its raw and fairly unadulterated form. So we've developed a proprietary process to be able to just cultivate mycelium in a submerged culture. So similar to beer brewing, but our tanks are stirred and aerated. We then, grow this vat full of mycelium, and then we then harvest it, and then post-process it in very, minimal impact. I mean, just basically forming, blending, and shaping into products that then replicate animal-based meat. So it's really pretty simple, right? The ingredient list is super simple, and it's whole calorie product.
Well, and what's so interesting is when you're describing that process, that growth process, I'm not hearing about a substrate. I'm not hearing about a rice or a chickpea or something it's grown on. So how is the mycelium growing? Is there a growth medium? What does that look like in these beer brewing canisters?
Yeah, we provide a growth medium. Right now, it's a completely soluble media, so we don't have solids in there. While we can use a variety of different medias, actually Tyler and my work we've explored lots of different potential growth medias, anything that's in liquid form that you could be growing mycelium on that really just has a carbohydrate source and kind of other essential nutrients. It consists of a carbohydrate, and nitrogen, and kind of minerals you need for a growth. But when we make up our own growth solution, what's nice is we can give it exactly what it needs and nothing more. So
Right.
when we talk about, reducing waste as much as we can, I mean, that's part of it, is the inputs should be very minimal. When we talk about animal meats, you're only using a portion of the animal actually as meat, and you have all this other stuff that you figure out other uses for, or it just becomes waste.
And likewise, an argument for a lot of folks who are into medicinal mushrooms, and I haven't necessarily heard this as much on the meat analog side, but when you introduce a physical substrate, your final product is going to be cut with whatever that physical substrate is.
Right. They'll say that your fungi will consume it, but it's really hard to accurately show that it will completely degrade that product. And likely you'll just have chunks of that solid media stuck within your fungal mat and things.
And to go back to your original question of like why fungi, why mycelium, to be an alternative to animal based. Well, I mean, as I know your listeners, probably are very aware. I mean, fungi is actually a similar kingdom to animals, right? And so what we spent a lot of time is refining this already inherent ability to produce protein very well. It's eukaryotic cells, very similar to animals. Then we spent a lot of time refining the growth media and the growth conditions to get a complete protein. So that's pretty hard to find with an amino acid profile almost identical to beef. You won't get that in plants without a lot of processing and blending with other proteins.
How is that possible? I mean, how are you guys doing that? Because I did see the nutrition facts, and I'm thinking they're integrating some kind of, I'm starting to see on the market now, I think, mushroom protein powders. So, I mean, how are you supplementing this to have such a robust nutrition profile?
So the first thing to note, we're not supplementing at all. We're just taking advantage of how the mycelium grows. And a lot of it, Tyler and I have been working on this for a while. It's identifying the right species. As we know, you have over 100,000 species of fungi. So trying to find the right one that we think is optimal for food consumption. That's what we went out and did, finding one that naturally has almost 60% protein by dry weight. That's very different than you're going to find in a mushroom cap, which may be around 25%.
Right.
And you think of things like soy, maybe max 37% dry weight. So it needs some sort of chemical extraction to increase the amount. We don't have to do any of that because the mycelium, as we've kind of directed it, grows 60% dry weight protein. I mean, a tremendous source of fiber, most of your daily vitamin Bs. I mean, from a single one of our servings, you get about 90% of your B12 daily intake. A lot of these nutrients, maybe you don't find naturally in plants that maybe animal meat actually has a lot of. We're able to provide that same nutritional experience, which is extremely important.
Yeah, and not to say that there's anything wrong with plants, right?
No,
Plants are amazing, but the way we looked at it was like nature is sort of a toolbox, and each species, whether plant, animal, or fungi, has evolved within a certain niche in the environment, and it developed a certain skill set and attributes in order to survive. So the way we looked at it, and why a reason I got so interested in fungi was like, wow, that niche is very specialized for a lot of different applications, right? So fungi grow, especially mycelium, is always searching around in the soil. The soil is a crazy and diverse and dangerous environment, right? I mean, there's
absolutely
billions of bacteria, other fungi, other animals that, it's crazy in there. And it also can be a desert in a lot of ways. So fungi have developed this way to kind of, creep and crawl through this environment, defend itself, and then also when it finds a pocket of nutrition, to take advantage of it, because you don't know when you're going to find it again, right? Again, we've kind of leveraged this existing inherent ability to take advantage of nutrients and the environment, and then we provide that condition in a controlled environment, and it just is able to incorporate complex carbohydrates, mineral salts, and produce a variety of different vitamins and minerals that we can take advantage of.
So that's impressive. You're not having to supplement the final product using, you guys are basically bioengineering this organism, selecting the right strain in terms of its growth process, introducing the right foods, if you will, into its mix to have it produce the final nutrition profile that you're looking for, which to me is probably the most holistic way that you get that really robust nutrition profile. And again, as someone who chooses a plant or fungi-based diet, I'm a big believer we need to start changing that. It's not plant-based, it's plant and fungi-based. Yep. As someone who's a big believer in that, that is one thing you look at is, are these things actually nutritionally hitting all the marks? And for anyone who's chosen this plant and fungi-based path, that B12 is a huge one. So my ears perked up when I heard B12, but protein and B12 are kind of the two specters that get raised of like, can this diet actually support a human? So I think you guys are answering two of those beautifully. And just going back to that growth process, I wasn't sure if I was reading this right, but I read that you guys are able to grow one container of your mycelium product in a day. That doesn't seem possible. I don't know. I mean, mycelium is voracious, but I don't know a mycelium that's that voracious to fill up a beer brewing tank in a day.
That's another reason why we do kind of submerged culture in tanks. You control the process really well, so you keep it in just its happiest growth state. Right. And so in that case, you're actually growing this thing exponentially because that is going to be really how it wants to grow. So you start looking at this thing can double every couple of hours, and it's just mind-boggling. Again, I mean, when I discovered this, during my PhD, I was making, milligrams of material, and that would take me like a week to make of just like advanced materials. And so when Tyler showed me this organism that's going to double every couple hours, is mind-boggling, but so cool.
And that's another reason why we use submerged fermentation as well, is fungi have their digestive systems outside of its body, right? Yep. And when you grow it on a solid substrate, it has to produce enzymes, and that fungi are really good at breaking things down, right? They're the decomposers of nature. So they produce all kinds of complex enzymes to break down recalcitrant, material in the environment, and then they digest it. Well, if we are able to provide it with an environment where it doesn't need to produce enzymes and digest all these things, it actually just has readily available nutrients to absorb. It's just ready to go, man. And it doesn't waste any time. It just grows as fast as it possibly can.
And what you guys are also getting at here is scalability. I mean, that was one of my big questions is how scalable is this product? Because when we're talking before about this being a really key part of a solution in terms of like reducing meat consumption for all those reasons we listed at the beginning, environmental, everything else, you would need a mass adoption, and that means making a lot of meaty product. So this sounds like it's one of the best options in terms of scalability as well for all those traits that you described that mycelium have inherently.
One of the reasons why I really think fermentation plays a big role in the future of food is because so much of this scales vertically, right? I mean, you start talking about reducing your land impact,
right?
And then you have these tanks and there's really not a lot of dead space in there. I mean, for us, imagine a huge tank. It's completely full of, this flowing mycelium inside, so that your product density is quite high in there. And again, completely controllable. And to me, it just seems like that's the right way going forward. Outside of just making a lot of it, the other part is, making it cheap enough to be able to compete against animal meats. Because even though animals are wildly inefficient, we've been growing them long enough that we've been able to reduce those costs at very reasonable levels. And so focusing on the inputs that we use and making sure we just design the whole process to be able to compete against, a commodity style protein and not just feed, affluent people.
Right. I mean, it's really comes down to, growing or producing our protein in 3 dimensions versus 2. Right. And we have a huge advantage, as Justin mentioned, is being able to utilize a small space when you're growing in 3 dimensions instead of laterally, whether it's animals or, plants, right? You can only grow in 2 dimensions.
And I mean, this seems like a process you could replicate almost anywhere. I mean, in terms of the actual production facility, you've got your contained environment. I think this is what's beautiful about any kind of mushroom cultivation, but especially what you guys are doing. I mean, this is something you could set up your production facility anywhere, thinking maybe way down the road or maybe not that far down the road, anywhere in the world, really.
You get it now, man. That's exactly right. Completely, geographically agnostic, these facilities, as long as you have access to your inputs, you get to control what's going on inside that tank. And what's going on inside that tank is just, a mycelium party.
and don't get me wrong here too. It's not like we're gonna have like a standalone system. Like we will have to rely on an agricultural supply chain. But when you look at the systems design, you put all of the energy input together, and that's something I studied a lot during my master's, was what is sustainability and how do you actually create systems that are circular and robust and reliant and regenerative if you can. And so we're using, again, each tool for its best trait. So plants are really, really good at taking the sun's energy and producing carbohydrates. Like, it's the best tool, it's the best system for doing that. But it's not really that good at producing proteins. Even the most GMO soy is only on average around 30% by weight protein. We're at 60% plus. Complete protein, right? So let's use plants at what they're really good for. Let's grow them in a regenerative way. And then let's harvest, carbohydrates from them and put them into a system that's really good at producing protein, textured protein that we love to eat. I guess it's that combination of the two that I believe is the most efficient way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love seeing that level of mindfulness through the whole process. Obviously, you guys are engineers and you've really thought this through, but having the final product be something that's sustainable in the grand scheme is great. But then to actually have the production process be so well thought out that each constituent part is sustainable or regenerative, I mean, that's what we all hope the future of food is. That's really exciting to see. And
understanding just the sheer volume of the food industry and just what it would take to feed the world. I mean, it's just billions of pounds of protein. It's insane. It can't be done from a small little facility. You have to just produce lots and lots of this stuff. So speed of growth is huge, and getting high yields is huge.
So scalability, sustainability, these are huge issues if you're going to make an impact. But the other half of this coin is what we talked about, making the product actually good. So it's worth switching. So without revealing all the secrets that make you guys amazing, when you see the products though, I mean, it's a bleeding steak. And when we're talking aqueous grown mushroom mycelium, I don't have that image in my head. So
we sent you some product, right? You tried it? You tried the steak?
Yes. And actually we haven't received it yet, but just for the sake of, we've tried it and we're saving the best part of it for a little showcase But what
Perfect.
wizardry are you guys using to turn this thing into that final product? The best you can tell us.
This is definitely the secret sauce here, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because there are no books written on how do you process beer tanks full of mycelium, right? And so
I haven't seen that one.
we first started this thing, like there was just no literature to go to try to figure this out. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to do this. And so I think the most simple way to look at this is like we're leveraging traditional food processing techniques that we've learned from the dairy industry, bread making, and cheese making. Wow. To be able to essentially, again, like, blend and then form this mycelium and realign those fibers in such a way to mimic the different muscle groups. So if we're targeting steak, we're going to realign the fibers in such a way to mimic steak. If we're trying to make chicken, we'll realign them for chicken. For fish, again, we can realign them for that as well. And then tuning the moisture really is how we do it. Now, it starts all the way from the seed through the fermentation, through the processing. And if you screw up one point, it's going to be a mess. And man, I wish we would have taken photos and documented some of the crazy goop we made in the past. So, I gave you a simplified 10,000 view approach to it, but when it comes down to it, that's it.
Yeah. And it was really important that, when we were designing this process, we weren't going to do any extractions. We're not going to use any harsh chemicals. We want to keep the mycelium whole because that's what we view it. It's a whole food, a whole material. And so for us, yeah, it's more of taking that materials point of view we started with, knowing that we have really long fibers at a microstructural level. Essentially, we already have muscle fiber and we have things that other plant-based meats are trying to make through things like extrusion. Right. And then now we have to align our mycelium muscle fibers together so that when you cut through it, you start feeling kind of the striations you would through kind of an animal meat product. It's hard to get to, but it helped kind of understand how mycelium grows and then also kind of what we're shooting for. What is the final product attributes that we really want to have?
And that 10,000 foot view hit on probably the biggest point, and you just hit on it as well, is you guys aren't doing extrusion. You aren't doing some crazy kind of mad scientist transformation. You're using best practices, food techniques that you guys have gleaned from other areas, applying it to your natural product. It just gets to that holistic nature of the final product and how you guys are trying to put this together with that mindset. And then what is the current product lineup that you guys are offering?
I mean, we want to be the whole muscle cut meat alternative company, right? Yeah. No one else can do that. We call it the battle of the burgers because everybody's out there doing burgers and ground products. Right, we want to be the whole cut that you can then, eat as a center of plate protein, or you can then cut up and chop it up and put it in whatever dishes and recipes that you want. So, the biggest one, is beef, obviously, and steak, right? And that's been the holy grail for a long time. So we love coming out with that and like showing, Impossible has been saying it was the holy grail for like 3 years now and hasn't been able to do it. And here we come out as a startup and nail it, And then, I think the number one consumer, I think right now is chicken. So that's a very likely. After that, it's really up to the market. Like, what do you want? What do you want to see? Because we've developed this process of realigning these mycelium fibers and mimicking muscle structure. Again, we can realign them in different ways to match these different muscle structures. We have prototypes for pork. We have prototypes for fish. We can do all those sort of things much easier than any other sort of meat alternative company.
Yeah, and I think those are probably the two biggest ones to start with are chicken and steak. But that was really the heart of that question is, what are the possibilities here? And it sounds like, the possibilities are any kind of meat analog you can imagine. You guys could go that direction. It's just, limited time and attention and resources and kind of picking which way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where, I was talking about originally was like having, my understanding of growing and cultivating mycelium with Justin's understanding of materials at a fundamental level. And how do you marry those two disciplines to make something? So, we started with directing the growth of mycelium from the very beginning. So how do you, branching frequency, thickness of the hyphae, the macro structure, all those things were ingrained in the technology from the very beginning. And then it was like, okay, well now, like if we were growing batteries, like, meat, like that's easy. And so then it was like, okay, well, what are the properties of meat, fundamental properties of meat? the alignment of those, and then let's just mimic that. And so we've developed this underlying platform that allows us to mimic all kinds of different muscle groups.
And then another part of the technology we really touch on is, when we were looking at different species and things, is kind of thinking, how can we keep our kind of raw mycelium rather flavorless? If you have a flavorless substrate, well, now that's how you can make a lot of these different meat substitutes. Now we can go out, find kind of natural, different flavors and spices and things, and then put them together to start creating those different flavors. So now you have a beef flavor, you have a chicken flavor, and you're just working with kind of a scaffold, if you will, flavorless protein fiber scaffold that has a muscle texture to it.
And that's where, we're targeting like beef and chicken to start, because that's what people are used to, right? That's the biggest market. We know those flavors are well accepted in our community. We sell billions of it every year. But in the future, I think the idea, and we'd love to hear from your listeners, like, does it have to taste like beef? We can marinate this thing in whatever we want. We can make it taste like whatever. And so as long as it matches, again, I think that same use occasion, because that is also ingrained in our society to have a, sort of a whole cut of protein, and then we deal with it. Yeah. So, we're used to those sort of recipes. But in the future, do we make this its own meat category that, it tastes like meaty? It's just delicious. But, that's something we'll have to work out as a company. We do know we want to target beef flavors and chicken flavors to start, but the future is really, really open.
We don't even have to think about animal meat. Meaty could be a whole new protein source that will become defined over the next couple of decades. I love that idea.
That's our win as a company. If in 5 to 10 years, if you have, animal-based and you have fungi-based as its own category of food, I think that's a win for us.
That sounds like kind of my dream world, no doubt. Now, do you guys have experience, just to get to like the entrepreneurship part of this with you guys, because I think it's a really cool story. Did you guys have experience in the food industry? I mean, when we're talking about all these flavor profiles becoming the future of meat and learning from cheesemakers and dairy makers, I mean, how much of a learning process was that for you guys to just enter this big competitive world of food?
We always joke about it. If we did have a background in food, we never would have went into it, because it's just like, it's just so intimidating, and there is so much complexity to it, and there's the regulatory piece of it, and there's just all of this complexity. We were both engineers, but we were lucky enough to bring on amazing top talent that have had years of experience in the food industry, and we built this team around us who do understand, how to make, it food safe, how to brand it and market it, how to bring it to consumers. And so I think we know what we don't know, and we're smart enough to hire people who know more than us in this category.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing for any entrepreneur I've talked to, is you kind of have to put together that team. You can't do it all yourself, which you guys starting out complementing each other with skill sets were really on that from the jump. But when you decided to go this direction of, basically changing the world with fungi, when did you feel comfortable to make that leap? And obviously the story of the founding of Meaty, like that's episodes of a podcast, or, episodes of an entrepreneur podcast down the road or something. But when did you guys feel comfortable? When did you have this idea of proof of concept? Did you still have your day job when you were making batteries, and then you discovered this and jumped into this full time? What did that process look like? Because I always think that's so interesting.
I mean, it's definitely not an overnight process, that's for sure. But we have been working on this for a number of years. We both got our PhDs back in 2016. And to be honest, we once we got our PhDs, we decided to make the jump into making this company full time. That's when we said, we're going to devote 100% of our time to this company. Now, we were still working on other advanced materials at the time. There was a lot of technology development. Understanding what we can do with this was that first little bit. And to make the jump into food, it wasn't until we got multiple confirming viewpoints from other people in the food industry. We didn't just go into it. We talked to a whole lot of people and just a whole lot of other companies to see, is this really a need? Where would we fit into the marketplace?
Right.
We were also lucky enough to bring on a lot of government grant money to help fuel the sort of the platform technology development. It just required a lot of sophisticated equipment, money, time, and for us to be able to dedicate 100% of our time to this, it couldn't be a night gig or whatever.
Right.
You couldn't just max out your credit card and go into the basement and try to figure this out. It took support from, again, government, Department of Energy, Advanced Manufacturing, the National Institutes of Science, to help us get to where we are today. And now venture-backed, venture capital.
That was going to be one of my big questions, was how you guys got the funding to put this together. Like I said, this is going to be on a How You Built It podcast in not too long, I'm sure, if you guys haven't already done it already. But what that reaction was from people in the food industry, from any investors that you pitched it to. Because right now with trends we're looking at, with the future of food being so obviously fungal, this seems like you guys are coming at the perfect time, built on a few years of obviously laying all the groundwork. But it sounds like then that the market, the investors, everyone sees this and has a great reaction to it.
Yeah, that was definitely not the case when we first started. People were like, fungus, what is mycelium? That sounds like pharmaceutical stuff. And people just thought we were crazy. And we're like, you just don't, again, you don't understand the efficiencies of what we're trying to develop. And if we can control this thing, like how much potential it could have, but yet they just didn't believe we could actually pull it off. So 2 years in a government research lab, developing the technology, getting to the point where we could have a proof of concept. Then when we had a proof of concept, it seems weird to see, but even just like a year or a half ago, this whole like alternative protein and meat alternatives wasn't quite as hot as it is now. And so it was some sort of visionary early investors that were like, these guys have something here. But one of the big concerns was, is the market ready for fungi based? Right. That's kind of weird. That's new. We have, your listeners is a pretty big group of folks, but mass market doesn't understand what fungi is. They think it's a plant. Right. So, we had to convince them that no, man, it tastes awesome. The nutritional profile is superior and we can produce it sustainably at scale. Like people will get over the fact that it's from the fungi kingdom, and actually they'll learn to love it. And that's what we're proving out right now as well.
Yeah. You guys are taking it beyond plant-based, and with, obviously I'm a symptom of this, but mushrooms, the power of fungi, are now kind of breaking through into mainstream consciousness. You have those movies like Fantastic Fungi making it popular, where everyone suddenly wants to be into mushrooms. So I think right now is definitely your guys' time to shine. But you're actually hinting at something that I know other companies have struggled with in the past. And not to be hyper specific, but I remember back when Quorn, who was kind of one of the first mycelium based meat products. I don't know their exact process. I don't even know if they're mycelium based, exactly what they're doing there. But I know that they had to put on their packages, this is a mold type product, which feeds into those fears that it sounds like you ran into early on. Are you guys faced with some of those regulatory issues as well? Are you going to have to put that on your package, or how do you approach that whole spectrum, that whole stigma?
Yeah, we learned a lot from how Quorn just botched their communication. Consumers, especially now, want to know how their food is made. Right. And we have nothing to hide. This is a very competitive market, and we think we have a head start. And just so, to protect our shareholders and our employees, we need to be somewhat, secretive on sort of proprietary stuff. Sure. But we are excited on the day that we can bring people in and show the world like how simple and all natural this process is. And don't hide from the fact that it's made from a fungus, made from mycelium, and just get out there and share it and be proud of it. And I think we'll be a lot better off. And so, yeah, we do, because of what Quorn did. You can't say it's like made from mushroom protein. So if it's not made from the fruiting body, you can't say it's made from mushrooms. So the FDA thought they misled or lied to consumers, saying it was from a mushroom instead of mycelium. Although, again, how to distinguish them, it's just really just this fruiting body. But I think we're okay with saying it's mycelium, because when we started with mushroom or mushroom roots, people had this preconceived association with mushrooms, and either they loved them or they didn't. Yep. And they thought that it was going to taste like a mushroom, and they thought, well, mushrooms are pretty nutritious, but I don't think of them as being like super protein packed, right? And having like all these other, iron and zinc and all these other things. And so once we said mycelium, either they, were myconauts and just like loved it and were like, oh my gosh, mycelium is going to save the world. This is super cool. Or they were like, what is mycelium, and tell me more about it. And then it gave us a sort of a pathway and a channel to communicate why it is so packed full of protein, why it has so many more nutrients than you would see in mushrooms or even in meat. Yeah. Because it's different. And now this is like a whole blue ocean that nobody else is playing in. And, we hope to just own the whole category.
It's like the education that'll surround mycelium, but it's great because we get to lead those discussions and we really get to tell people about it. But then you can also point to a lot of other areas. People are eating mycelium already. I mean, you're like, hey, are you eating tempeh? Oh, did you know you're eating mycelium? Hey, how about a lot of the cheeses you eat? Oh yeah, they'll have it in there as well. Do you like soy sauce? Because that's made, it's, that's a byproduct of it. So it takes time, and we just need to keep educating consumers. And I think over the past years, they're showing a willingness to learn about these different alternatives.
Well, and I think you hit it on the head. People want to know more and more what their food's made out of. And there are all these kind of invisible roles of fungi in our diet anyway. Even when you get down to like citric acids derived from a fungi, yeast is an Ascomycete fungi. But you guys get to have this opportunity because you're so macro with your product and so striking. You can really introduce people to this relationship we have had for millennia with fungi in our food. So that's a really cool place to be. And I was stoked to see you guys kind of embracing that. And I can obviously tell, probably starting with Tyler, now you too, Justin, you guys are myceliated, you're obsessed with mushrooms. So it's like the perfect ambassadors, not only to do this kind of game-changing food product, but also to represent kind of part of this mushroom community and this growing consciousness around fungi. It's really inspiring to see that. And it's just, again, one more symptom of this kind of breaking into mainstream consciousness. And, we talked about entrepreneurship and Tyler just hinted at it, but it did, when I was reading some of the information he sent over, I could tell you guys were stoked, like he just said, to share this thing. You were like, we dream of the day when we could just show people and people can make it themselves. And whenever people have that motivation, I'm like, hold on, are you crazy? Are you really that committed to making change that you want people to make this themselves? So what does that future look like to you? Do you really think this is something that, once you guys are situated, you're out of that stage where everything has to be protected, which obviously is really important in the market environment. Do you really think this is something that people could do decades from now? People could make their own meat this way?
Yeah, I kind of joke around with this term. I don't know if it's going to catch on or not, but like the universal basic meat. Yeah. Right. So it's like
UBM.
It's like, yeah, exactly. That like every culture on every continent on the world now has an underlying healthy, nutritious protein that helps provide most of your macronutrients, because protein and fiber and all these other vitamins and minerals, maybe not your only source, but now you have this underlying protein that's super nutritious and accessible. And then you can supplement that with whatever you want, right? But now we know we have this underlying, because there's a lot of food inequality out there, right? And I think a lot of the problems we have with agriculture is just a mismanagement of practices. And I've spent a lot of time in the developing world, and it's scary to think that they have a growing population that has a desire for meat, right? So how do we supplement that as well? So I think we hope this to be your go-to daily protein that you have to satisfy the mass population. It'd be nice to be like a staple of everybody's diet if they prefer it.
Yeah, and I guess have you guys done any exploration of other markets outside the U.S.? You just hinted at like the big ones I was thinking of when you think about developing countries that, where this kind of nutrition profile typically offered by meat is linked to so many factors when it comes to brain development, success, all these things that are important. So you have this possibility to really change the game and change outcomes for a lot of people. Have you already started exploring other markets outside the U.S.?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bandwidth issue.
Sure.
And we have to make sure that we keep building the company so we build for lasting success, so that we can be as ambitious as we're talking about here. It's proving out some of the manufacturing here first, showing the scalability. And then once you prove that, now you have a plant. It's copy paste all over the world, right? Then you're able to go after some of these other continents. Probably jumping ahead, but if I thought about a lasting legacy of media, I would want to see a mycelium protein production facility on every continent. There's no reason why not.
Yeah,
we talked about it earlier, like the geographic agnostic ability to grow this in a controlled environment. As long as you have access to some minimal agricultural resources, why not?
It's really inspiring, and that's why I'm kind of jumping the gun. Like, are you guys worldwide yet? Because I think it is such a fantastic idea. How big are you guys now? Just as like a quick snapshot of where the company is now. I guess just where did you start? When did you start? Where did you start? And what does the company look like now in terms of size and everything?
Yeah, no, it's funny too, is I kind of always think about it in stages of like how big our like cultivation process is. And
Yeah.
it's like we started with just like little shaker flasks. We're talking like 25 milliliters, right?
Yeah.
That's where we started for years. We were just playing around with that. And then we went into like 10-liter bioreactors, and then we started modifying brewery equipment to scale this thing. And now we have much more sophisticated. I'll give you a little peek here. I know the viewers can't see that, but there's our system in there.
Wow.
And now we have something like that that's a little
Yeah.
bit more sophisticated. And in 6 months, we're going to 5x that. And in 2 years, we're going to have, upwards of, 250,000 liters of fermentation capacity, producing around 20 million pounds. And that's just the start. Then as soon as that one's built and up and running, we have plans to build one that produces hundreds of millions of pounds of meaty and finished product. And then that's what we would want to then sort of cut and paste throughout whatever regions make sense.
I'm sure you guys hear this analogy all the time. You're growing like mycelium. It's
We
it's
reached
exponential.
exponential phase. We had the nice lag phase of a couple of years, and now we're in exponential, and we hope to keep it there for a while.
Yeah, that's really cool. And now I thought I read in the origin story as well that the original strain that you guys took was something you found in the wild.
No, it's a natural occurring wild type strain.
You could find it in the
Um,
wild.
Yeah.
you can find it in the wild for sure. That's just the thing that was interesting. I think that's the reason why it took so long to get to the point was like, fruiting bodies, you have this collection of mycelium that's at high enough volume to actually consume.
Right.
But as we know, there's lots of fungi species that don't produce fruiting bodies. It's just they're
Right.
so microscopic and dispersed throughout the soil, you can't harvest it. So we just developed a way to bring it indoors, grow it at enough concentration that you can actually harvest it.
And again, to the point of our technology, we really kind of went back to a fundamental perspective to think, how are we going to grow this stuff, lots of it, make it cheap? And so we knew that there was probably a great species out there for us. And if we just limited ourselves to kind of going out into nature and trying to find one, we're missing out on the other hundreds of thousands of species. So we really wanted to make sure we accurately, screened a lot, thought about exactly what the right one was for us, and then we went to go find it. And so, yeah, I think it would be harder if we just went out into nature
Oh my
and
gosh.
tried to. We might have made it work, but we might have also
Yeah.
missed out on the real opportunity to go find the right one.
No, my initial thought when for some reason I thought you guys foraged it, I was like, that's kind of insane because I think it would take lifetimes to find, the most efficient fungi and actually go out that season and have it be out and all that stuff. So, so that makes a lot of sense. Well, then,
But you might have read, so Corn said that. If you read Corn's origin story, they said that the strain they used was found in like one of their employees' gardens.
okay,
And
I'm not sure how that makes me feel.
Exactly. Well, I think it's kind of cool. Okay, it's naturally occurring, but again, there's
Right.
lots of naturally occurring strains that are all over the world. But to me, it was like, yeah, man, you limited yourself because we have something that grows almost twice as fast, that has way more protein, and we think is just a safer product. So again, we screen there's tons of different species you can choose from, and so we then use sort of guardrails that we are looking for in order to select the one we thought most appropriate and not limiting ourselves.
I know so many engineers that do that. They just give me everything and I'll screen my criteria against it and I'll pick the best one.
Exactly.
So having
got
that
it.
engineering background is the reason you guys are so successful. We've talked huge picture, worldwide meaty, but what's in like the most immediate term future for you guys? We just talked about scalability. Are there any other exciting products on the horizon? Are there any rollouts?
Yeah, so what we want to do is use this interim time before we can scale to national distribution, is
Right.
to make sure that we connect with the public and have them try it and discuss what they like, what they don't like, what do they understand it, do they don't understand it. So the direct to consumer is really, it's not like a full blown e-commerce platform like you would see on a traditional food brand. This is more of like a communication channel. We want to connect with people who are looking for a better meat, and then talk to them about it. Like, what do you think about it? What properties do you like? What would you like to see? Do you understand how it's made? Do you understand the benefits that it's providing to you? And make sure we don't create a product in a bubble that we want to make something that the mass public wants, right? So a success for us is going to be not only is, some, kid from Berkeley loving it, but also like served in a diner in Nebraska, right? We want to make sure that everybody sees why this is beneficial. This isn't a political thing. This is like a humanitarian thing. And we just want to provide you with something that's super nutritious. And what do you want to see out of it? What do you like about it? And do you understand it?
And you just spoke to something so big, as I know with a lot of people when they do a food startup, it's like identifying that one perfect consumer for you and really going after them. And you're kind of saying, no, this is a platform for everybody. Now, if people want to get involved, they want to either learn more about you guys, find out where they can get their hands on some of the products, where's the best place to find Meati?
I definitely follow us on social media, Instagram, and engage with us. Like, talk to us and give us your thoughts, and let's create a dialogue here. We're going to start selecting and building out what we like to call like the Meati tribe. And these are like true believers in creating a more sustainable and robust protein supply chain.
Right.
And how do we make this product together with the right attributes and the right communication strategies? So, if you're interested in that, again, reach out via Instagram and talk to us and tell us you want to help give us good guidance. We don't want just like people who are going to just, oh, this is delicious, it's fine, like go with it. We want to hear what the critiques of it so we can continue to make this better and again, make it mass market adoption.
Well, and before we did this interview, I wasn't sure exactly what I felt about the company because I didn't know you guys, and I was kind of really excited to meet you and hear the genuine enthusiasm that you guys have, and really this commitment to not only sustainability, doing the right things, but also the transparency that I think has to go hand in hand. When someone says they have a mission like that, it really falls short if they're not being transparent and open and saying the things you're saying. I'm like, hey, let us know if you don't like it. Let us know, we'll tell you as much as we can about our production processes, how we do this thing. Because I think that transparency is more what we want as food consumers. And when someone's right up front with that, I'm like immediately, wow, I trust you. Like, I'm part of the tribe. I trust you guys. I thought that was really heartening. So, I'm kind of moving to the final thoughts that I ask all my guests. And, this one you can go wherever you want with it. But I always like to know, what is a mushroom that each of you love and why? And this can be like for whatever reason. It's a beautiful mushroom. It's a mushroom you like eating, and it doesn't have to be a favorite. But what's a mushroom that you guys love and why?
One of my favorites, especially in the edible mushroom range, is like chanterelles. The reason I like that is because it's very nostalgic to me. I was in Italy, like northern Italy, and I feel like I had these. It must have been in season. There was just like a ton of different dishes. But every time I saw it on a menu, the fact that they would call it like fungi, Funghi, I like the connection back to the fungi kingdom because there's a lot outside of edible mushrooms in that whole fungi kingdom. I mentioned, I think it's 144,000 different species, and each of them are great at maybe doing something. And so understanding that, to me is just, that's the power of the fungal kingdom.
And then what about you, Tyler? I think I'm curious to hear what one of your favorites is.
Man, that's a tough one. There's so many cool ones for so many different reasons. I think the one that doesn't get a lot of credit is the puffball. They're easy to identify. You're never going to get that one wrong. As long as you harvest them when they're ripe, if you will, they're delicious, I think. And they grow all over the place. So I think easy answer, that's my favorite.
Hard to go wrong with Calvacia. And I once heard a great stat that I love bandying about whenever someone brings up puffballs, that in a giant puffball, Calvacia giganta, if all of the spores in that actually formed that big of a fruiting body, it would be 8 times the size of planet Earth. So that's how much biological capacity is just in one giant puffball. So I think that's an awesome choice. And then another question for both of you is, what has a relationship with fungi given to you, and maybe how has it changed some of your perspectives on biology and life and the interactions in our environment? What has fungi given to you, and how has it changed your perspectives?
I mean, to me, because my relationship with fungi is only a couple years old, I mean, to be honest, I was not really in any sort of, biological applications before I started that work. I think it was partially just, not understanding the power of it. And I think I touched on this earlier. understanding the efficiencies of biology, that these are almost like self-forming materials, to start looking at that, or self-assembling. we spend so many years of our life trying to develop technologies to make different self-assembling materials and stuff. And here you have biology doing it for us.
Yeah.
Low energy, low resources. The fact you can take advantage of that, I think outside of just fungi as the future of food, it really is going to be a huge part of manufacturing going forward.
Yeah, for me, I think, from the very beginning, I think, spending a lot of time out in the woods, I was always just mystified by mushrooms, right? I mean, they're just so crazy looking. They're always growing in the weirdest spots, crazy colors and stuff. And it just totally stood out. And there was something mystical about that seemed to be sort of like separate from the world, from the natural world around it. Although, as we know, it's super well connected.
Right.
And then, as I went through, my career, through biologist and then into engineering, I sort of like lost this like mysticism of the natural world. We started looking at it as ways of like, how do we control it and how do we measure it and that sort of thing. Actually, when I started reading Entangled Life again, and it was just like, man, I need to bring this back into my life again. This wonder and magic of the natural world around us, and how much we don't know about this natural system, and how much there is still so much to learn. And I think fungi in particular, one of the main reasons I believe people really like it is because there's so much to learn. Like, we don't really know that much about it. And that's just so exciting, especially in a world that we live in today where we feel like we're masters of the universe.
Wow, beautifully said. I think fungi definitely does that. Even seasoned scientists, my father is actually a biologist for like 40 years, plant biologist, but again, in kind of this hyper reductionist model. And when I got into fungi, it like opened up this whole world for him. So it can do that for the most accomplished scientists. And then for folks like Justin, or like myself, when you get introduced to it over a few years, it just blows open all these possibilities that can't help but change your perspective. So really, really, really well said, guys. And then we've talked about this some, but just as kind of a general, what do you hope the lasting impact is of your work with Meati, your work with fungi, in the future, if you're building houses or batteries or whatever you're building? What do you hope the lasting impact of your guys' work ends up being?
For me, I'm just so enthralled with manufacturing in general. I want to see a mycelium protein production facility on every continent. I'm serious about that. That's the goal.
Pretty huge dream, pretty huge impact.
Yeah. Dream big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the same line as like, I hope to be a small part of creating a whole new category of food. And when's the last time a new category of food emerged, right? And to be part of that, and to be part of something that can have such a big impact and be global, just being part of that, I think is so cool.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is really visionary. It's super timely. I know they say, every overnight success is 10 years in the making. It sounds like you guys are very much on that path. There's been a lot of legwork to get into this point, but it's really exciting to watch what you guys are doing. I definitely encourage everyone to follow along with their journey. And yeah, I just really appreciate you guys coming on and being open and sharing your story and your product. It's really exciting and something that really is, I think, poised to make a lot of change. So thank you guys for coming on the Mushroom Hour.
Thank you. And that was a pleasure. That was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is great.